Why, hello, Southeast sports fans. I'm Hanna Barton, and along with Brenden Schaeffer, we are previewing your 2025 Auburn Tigers today. Going to get into what this season's going to look like for Auburn on the football field. And when you think about Auburn these past couple seasons, I don't know about you, Brenden, but the first word that kind of comes to mind with me is struggling. And so the main focus is going to be Hugh Freeze, in my opinion, is one of the hottest seats in the SEC this season. So let's talk a little bit about Coach Freeze and what this season means to him and keeping his career at Auburn.
Yeah, I believe 11-14 record at Auburn has not gone the way that he wanted it. Certainly not the way that their fan base has wanted it to go thus far. And of course, you got changeover at the quarterback position, trying to get things figured out this year. Jackson Arnold likely to be the starting quarterback, the transfer coming in from Oklahoma. It's an important year for Hugh Freeze. You mentioned hot seat. I definitely agree with that. The extent maybe to which you can expect a big boost for the Auburn Tigers this season is in some question. When we were at SEC Media Days, the media contingent there voting Auburn 11th in the preseason media poll. And so it's like internally, the expectations from the fans, from that community, want to see a winning season, want to see progress for Hugh Freeze this year. But I think when you look at the landscape and how people are viewing them around the league, nationally, there's maybe some skepticism that it's going to come to fruition this year.
And for those that may not know exactly what the definition of struggling is when it comes to this Auburn team, 11-14 in Hugh Freeze's past two seasons, two consecutive losing seasons, 5-7 last season, only two conference wins, which when you're talking about the SEC, obviously the difficulty of the playing field comes into play, but two wins is just not going to cut it, especially at a program like Auburn. The recruiting has been kind of stagnant in recent years. And now this schedule for them may provide a little bit of help because it's not their toughest schedule in compared to maybe Freeze's first two seasons. So that might be able to help them out a little bit. But as you mentioned, new quarterback at the helm. So this offense is going to look a lot different. And in my opinion, really getting back on the right track for this Auburn team, it starts with the offense.
Yeah, it's going to need to. And look, we'll pull up the schedule to kind of make reference a little bit, Hannah, to what you were talking about there with Auburn this season. Is it a little bit more manageable? Perhaps, but anytime you're playing an SEC schedule that's going to have difficult games in it. But when you look at games that, like, okay, conceivably, yeah, you have to go to Vanderbilt, but that's another team that was ranked near the bottom of the preseason poll. You get to host Kentucky. You get to host Missouri this year. Like, there's some games on their schedule that I think internally they're going to look at and say, hey, we've got to chalk up some of these as W's. You avoid, some of the bigger teams, but of course you still have to play Alabama every year. You still have to play at Georgia, but you get to play them at home. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see the way that kind of shakes out for them. We will talk a little bit about win total expectations and what we really see coming for this Auburn team in a bit. But how do you kind of view it with that offense? Because Jackson Arnold, with what we saw from him in Oklahoma, it was a little disjointed. It was probably not what that fan base was hoping to see from him, and then he's sort of out the door the next year. But at the same time, Oklahoma had dealt with a lot of wide receiver injuries, and so you can't necessarily pin all of the struggles of that offense on the quarterback position. Auburn brings him in and was a guy that had a lot of hype before he played for OU last year, and now Auburn may be trying to turn back the clock a little bit as a post-hype sleeper, get the most out of Jackson Arnold.
Hugh Freeze has said that he thinks Arnold's going to fit a little bit better into his offense. Will he? I think that's to be determined. One thing that really stuck out to me was Freeze's comments at SEC Media Days, because obviously coming from the way things shook out for him at Oklahoma, he's got some confidence issues. Even if he doesn't realize it, there's going to be that little nag in the back of your brain saying, I got benched. And Freeze has talked about like having the defense almost go a little bit easier on him in practice to build the confidence of Arnold, which I think has really garnered some mixed responses. Personally, I don't know if that's the best tactic, but apparently that's something that they've been trying to do to get Arnold back on the right track.
Yeah, and look, we'll see. I think it makes sense to have him in there. They've got other guys that they've brought into that quarterback room, but it really seems like if you go out and get a guy who had been a starter in the Southeastern Conference, you get him in the transfer portal, the expectation is that he's going to come in and be the starter. But what Jackson Arnold learned from last year's struggles and how he can potentially grow and mature from that is going to be interesting. I will say this. As much as Oklahoma did have a lot of those injuries, you have a guy like Cam Coleman in this wide receiver core that from day one should allow Jackson Arnold to sort of have a leg up on what he was working with in terms of the weapons with the Sooners last year. So is that something that, kind of locks it into place, or is he going to have to put more of the onus on himself still to make sure he is the leader of this team, the leader of this offense? That's going to be another aspect of this. There's talent on the defense as well. Don't get me wrong, but we certainly would expect if Auburn's going to have a better season than they did a year ago, the offense is going to have to be a driving force behind that.
Yeah, that wide receiver room, like you mentioned, loaded. They've got Cam Coleman. It's really going to be a go-to for them offensively. Sophomore Malcolm Simmons back at practice, had that arrest in early July. So he's back. So definitely able to have a little bit more targets for Arnold on the offense. You mentioned the defense. They were a top 20 rushing defense last season, 31st overall total in college football. So their defense was kind of a bright spot for them. I know you hear a top 30 defense in the SEC, isn't technically really up to standard, but it still was comparatively to the offense, something that they were able to rely on. And I think being able to bring back the people that they have in the defense this year, they've got their top players in the backfield, in the secondary returning in Kalen Lee and Jay Crawford. So that's going to be a huge help for them. And then their leading tackler and Caleb Harris is also back this season. So the defense is going to be something that this team really is going to have to continue to hang their hat on for sure.
Yeah, and another big name, Keldrick Falk. If you look at him, he's a guy that, you start thinking about NFL mock drafts when it's his time to come out, that he's going to be a real impactful guy up front there for them. So I think they've got a decently balanced way that they can approach things, offense, defense this year. But again, it feels like we're going to say that about a lot of the teams coming into the season. And that's what's so great about SEC football is you get into the meat and potatoes of that schedule and some of the games that, feel like a toss-up or might feel like a game that Auburn's an underdog, but then they might be able to come out and surprise. And by October, certainly the time you get into November, we might have a completely different view of this team. We'll talk a little bit about the schedule coming up, but the Baylor game starting things off, you hit the ground running with a non-conference, and then the fun begins. So I'll be very curious to see what we get out of this Auburn team in 2025.
You're not the only one that's curious. We're going to go ahead and have Kylie dive a little bit deeper into it. We got to talk to Cole Kublick at SEC Media Days. She's going to go ahead and take over from here, but you'll see what the former Auburn Tiger had to say about his former team.
Yes, thank you so much, Hannah. Well, like you said, we got to talk to Cole Kublick at SEC Media Days, who said that Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma is going to look completely different than he will at Auburn. At Oklahoma, he went into every play essentially with the defensive mindset, afraid to throw the ball, afraid to push their team forward, but this is going to be different under Hugh Freeze. Now, granted, Hugh Freeze is in a little bit of a hot seat right now, coming off 2 losing seasons, but that only means high expectations for the Auburn Tigers this season. Let's hear more from Cole.
Jackson Arnold went through a lot last year. I thought he got benched too early. Mm-hmm. We had their Houston game, and then we had the South Carolina game, I think one other game. I thought they definitively benched him too early. If you want to take him out and say, hey, we need to let this Hawkins kid get a series or two, let's just see what happens. Take a break, watch from the sideline. But they benched him. And I thought it was too early. Well, Seth Luttrell had never coached quarterbacks. He was coaching quarterbacks. Then Seth Luttrell gets fired. Your top 7 receivers were hurt. Your top 2 running backs were hurt. Your offensive line was in and out, patchwork. So it was a bad situation in general. And then we were talking about this, and Greg said, well, let me add to it here. And I know a lot of people don't get this and don't look at this. He said, it's hard to play quarterback for a defensive-minded head coach. I'm like, whatever, dude. You're just trying to make quarterbacks sound like it's a hard job, and we all know it's not. And he said, here's what you don't understand. The messaging is constantly don't screw up. Mm-hmm. Don't throw an interception. Don't ruin this drive. Don't hurt field position. Don't hurt the defense. It's always don't or be careful or watch out for. Mm-hmm. And I sat back and I started thinking about that, and I was like, would Eli Drinkwitz or Kirby Moore ever talk to their quarterback that way? Would Lane Kiffin in his right mind ever approach a quarterback that way? Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisian, Hugh Freeze, they would never, ever talk to it. Jeff Lebby would never approach a quarterback. It's always attack, go get it. We got this. You can do this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Shoot your shot. Take your chance. Go get it. Take the shot play. Take this right here. Go get that. Go get this. And so I started thinking like, man, I could see where that would seep in.
Mm-hmm.
And Jackson Arnold's biggest problem last year, and I'm serious, was letting go of the football. He could not throw the ball at times because I'm watching the film and it's like you see him hitch and you see the receiver open and you're like, good Lord, kid, let go of the ball. Like it's there. And he could not do it. And that's what Greg was referencing. It's like, if that's ingrained in your brain that don't, or be careful, you're going to be hesitant. And he was. And so I asked him about it yesterday and he was very careful. He's like, I'm not pointing a finger at Coach Venables. I take all the blame for how I played last year. He said, but I will say it's an accurate statement. It's real.
It's a great point. And as
it's
someone,
awesome. I'd never heard it stated that way before.
And as someone, I mean, you played, you get it. And in this world of, we do see transfers, then, you know, sometimes we look at it as kids are transferring for a paycheck now, but a lot of times it is they're transferring because they want a better program. They want a system that they work better in, or they had an experience like he did at Oklahoma. How much do you think fans overlook that piece of the rewiring of what you are taking with you from your old program and then also trying to be what this new program is?
I think fans overlook a lot of aspects of transferring and transfers. Like, I'll give you another story. We had Alabama 2 years ago. It was Saban's going into his last year. And it was early in the season. It may have been the first game, second game. And Tom Hart was like, we're sitting there waiting. And he said, I think Alabama had seriously like 23 kids leave the year before. And he's like, I'm going to ask him about all these transfers and like why they left. And because you have that question. Please do not ask him that question. And the SID at the time came back in and I was like, he wants to ask him this. And he's like, don't ask him that. And Saban, you always knew when he was mad when his foot would start to cross his legs and his foot would start to move. And so he comes in, sits down, and first question, Tom does it. I'm like, and there goes the foot. The foot starts moving. I'm like, good, he's pissed. And he gave us a great answer. And he basically went into, he said, I know when you see these kids leave, you think not first team, didn't play. He said, here's what you don't understand. The other guys we have to bring in to replace them, they've never practiced with us. So they don't even know what part of the field the offensive line practices with. They don't know how to go through our drills. They don't know what we want from them when we say, okay, we're going to go do 8 ladder or whatever. They don't know what that is. We have to explain all that. They don't know our verbiage. They don't know our terminology. They don't know when we go through a certain part of our practice, we want full speed, half speed, 3/4 speed. Don't hit the quarterback. Do hit the quarterback. We have to teach all of that. He said, you know what we're not doing? We're teaching all that. We're not teaching them how to play football or how to play our football or how to fit into our football team. He said, so we redo everything with everybody. That wastes our time. Now, he's not saying it's a waste of time, but he's just saying we would rather be excelling in other parts of how we coach these guys, and we're not doing that. So it holds them back. He said then to take all of that and then make them into a second or third team or first team player on our group is even more difficult. So I think we just lose sight of, like somebody asked me an offensive line question about Kentucky earlier, and why would this guy work or why would this guy not work? And I said, well, if you're going to similar schemes, systems, and you're bringing in guys who have done the things you're going to ask them to do, there's a much better chance that's going to be a fit. I don't think people look at that. They look at what you referenced earlier. Well, 247 has them here, or On3 has them ranked here. Which, how do we rank guys in the portal? Because some guys have played 4 years of college football, and some guys have played none. Like, we got a high school kid that watched for a year, and he's like the number 3 receiver in the portal.
He's the best watcher. He hasn't played a snap of college football.
Best watcher. he's the best sideline stander in America. But I don't know how we rank these kids next to each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Because some have 5 years of college football. Even being there for 2 years is super valuable. The practice time, understanding the speed, the collisions, like how to take care of your body, how to recover, how to bounce back. That's all valuable. And then high school guy comes in for 1 semester and he's transferring. He's your number 1 transfer, whatever. I'm like, he can't be. It's not possible. So I just think we overlook a lot of how and why kids leave and what the inherent advantages are going to be that could allow them to succeed somewhere else.
Do you think that these veterans like understand how important they are into like leading these teams and leading the kids that are coming in from the transfer portal?
Some do, some don't. I think that's when you hear coaches talk about culture, that's a big part of the culture. I think leadership is taking ownership in your team. So instead of allowing guys to stand in a corner because they might not have like a big personality and they don't want to ask questions, and fall behind, you go grab them and say, you're not being a jerk about it, but you're like, hey man, come get in line, like get your reps here. Or what do you not understand what I need to help you with? And it's pushing guys along. I've heard a couple of coaches say great leaders lead when things are easy, not when things are hard. Because it's easy to try to lead when you're mad or you see somebody not doing something. But when things are going right, that's when real leaders show up, because how can we do even more? Or how can I get more out of you, or get more out of me, or get more out of everybody? So I think putting ownership in your team is the way that leadership shows up. And that's when they understand that. Yeah. But there's a lot of me out there too now.
Yeah.
I'm take care of me, get my bag, do my thing, get me to the draft. Like, so it's hard to avoid that in today's college football.
What do you think is the ideal balance between, the foundations of being a leader, finding those things that come with the program that aren't just about me, but then also being able to navigate like the new landscape of proper compensation? And I'm not talking about just like these third-party entities. I'm talking about the revenue sharing and actually using NIL the way it's designed. What does that balance look like?
From a program perspective, or like a player you're recruiting perspective?
Either or.
Well, from a player perspective, I think you can probably get most of that based on their circle, who they're intertwined with, who they're allowing to help make decisions. I think you can probably spend 10 minutes with that group of people and get an idea of what you're dealing with. From a program perspective, that's the second time I've been asked this today, and I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's whatever works. Like, the best parenting advice I ever got was when my best friends called me. He goes, hey man, you're gonna get a lot of people that say the baby needs to sleep here, the baby needs to do this, feed them this way and that way. He goes, just remember this, do what works for you and don't be afraid of it. Somebody's like, well, don't ever let your baby sleep in the light, or like, don't do this, or don't feed them this. If that works, do it. And that's what I think it is in college football right now. If it works for you, do it. Auburn's a good example right now. So people are mad at Hugh Freeze because he has, I don't know, 4 kids committed, 6 kids, whatever it is, and they're in the 50s. But what people who are mad about that don't look at is, if you dive into this roster, if they have a good year this year, and most of the kids are happy, want to come back and say, let's make a run at a title, there's a boatload of would-be third-year players. So they can't go to the NFL, and they're coming off a good year, and they're going to be back on your team. Well, what's that going to be? Expensive, number one. And number two, you can't go oversign a high school class because we have roster limits now. So I don't think people look at it and say, well, they could realistically have 62, I don't know the exact number, first, second, third year guys back next year that are happy, and we got to spend some money on them. We can't go sign 10 5-stars because we won't be able to afford them.
Right.
So it's going to be different every year for every team. And if your roster has a bunch of guys going to the NFL, like, you better start recruiting high school guys now. If you got a bunch of Luther Burdens, you better understand they're probably leaving, and that's okay. It's because they're good. But we need to get ready to sign a big high school class now. So I think it fluctuates, and you have to do what works for you. Like, if you don't have the money to go sign all these 5-stars, you probably take more of the developmental route. We'll take a 3-star. Take a 3-star that grew up in St. Louis and always wanted to play at Missouri. Like, that's one thing that there's just not a ton of anymore, is there's not a ton of these kids that grew up in, Birmingham or Mobile and like diehard Bama fan his whole life. Grandparents went to Bama. He's a little underrated, but he's going to give us everything. We probably never have to worry about him leaving. We're going to take a flyer on him.
Yeah.
Those guys are rare.
How do you think, going off that, because a lot of times when you get these guys that are, they grew up fans, their dream is in playing for this program, maybe they're not quite there yet, you'll see them walk on. And we're going to see kind of walk-ons start to walk-ons. So that's why I was going to. What do you think? I mean, what is this going to? Is that only going to contribute to it more? You think? And
I do, and I think if you get some of those guys, which you're probably going to get now, you're going to get the kids that in high school went to Troy or UAB or Jacksonville State or Alabama A&M, and then they get to come play at Alabama or Auburn, or you're going to get kids that go play at Missouri State or Central Arkansas or whatever, and then they get to go play at Arkansas or Missouri after that. So and that's one of the reasons that they'll pick that for maybe $50,000 less than another school as a transfer. So like I said, there's no Waze doesn't have an address for this. Like, there's no GPS for where we're going.
Apple Maps is broken.
You can put it in, but there's just going to sit there and circulate. Like, it's just going to keep trying to they're going to try to find it, but it's not there. We don't have a roadmap for this. Like, we can't open it up and say, okay, give me directions, because it's going to be different
It's
next
gonna change
year.
tomorrow,
It'll
yep.
change again. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back into it. Now we're going to talk more of the gambling perspective, as we look at kind of the overall over-under for Auburn this year. They have them at 7.5 looking at the season. Brenden, as you're looking at obviously starting this season at Baylor, what games are kind of you thinking it's going to sway one way or the other?
Yeah, 7.5 at DraftKings Sportsbook, and to bet over on this win total, you're given minus 160 odds. So, as an example, you'd have to spend $16 to hope to win $10 in profit. So it's heavy juice on the over, which means the general expectation is that Auburn could get there. And I'm sure Hugh Freeze would like to at least get to that 8-win total. As we mentioned, it's kind of a put up or shut up year for him. So you circle that Baylor game for sure in week 1. It's a non-conference game, so it doesn't impact the SEC standings at all. But certainly as you look at the 7.5, that's a game that if Auburn can get out of the gate, they're looking pretty good to be able to start with some momentum. They host Ball State, as you see there on your screen. South Alabama is another home game. And look, if they can get Baylor, every reason to believe they should be 3-0 going into an interesting rematch against the Oklahoma Sooners. Again, Jackson Arnold's the quarterback this year for Auburn, but that game was wild between the Sooners and the Tigers last year, where it seemed as though Auburn had them dead to rights and they couldn't find a way to close that one out. Now you have to flip the script and go to Norman to play that one. So, Hanna, I would say you circle September 20th first and foremost, because that's one that, well, on the one hand, you feel like you let get away if you're Auburn. On the other hand, your quarterback is the guy that was on the other side. He was participating for Oklahoma at that point. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And it's one that I feel like if you're talking about the 7.5, that's in range to be able to win. Like, you want to clean that one up because you know you've got Georgia later. You know you've got the Iron Bowl at the end of the season, a tough one at Texas A&M in September. But honestly, you get that Oklahoma game and the clouds begin to potentially part for you to have that 8-4 season and hit over. Because when you go through that stretch of late October, early November, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, 4 in a row, and then you've got a free one with Mercer later in November, like, that stretch is doable by SEC standards. I'm not saying that they'll go 4-0 in that stretch that begins with Missouri. Obviously, they lose a tough one to Missouri at the end in Columbia, Missouri last year, but they get to host that game. You can go down to Fayetteville and conceivably win. Kentucky, not a ton of expectations. Vanderbilt, we know they've got Pavia back, but that's a winnable game. Like, for a team that hasn't had success, Hanna, it's not super surprising to see that 7.5 number with heavy juice on over when you look at the schedule and realize Auburn should basically be in the mix in just about every game. Outside of the Georgia game would be the one on paper that you'd say, all right, that's going to be tough. Even you can never say they're out of an Iron Bowl. We know how that rivalry is. So one game that you might chalk up as an L, everything else I think is legitimately in play for Auburn this season.
Yeah, I would say Texas A&M at Texas A&M might be one of those toss-up. But again, it depends on what kind of momentum are they carrying in from those first 4 games. If you're 3-0 going into Norman, you get a win on the road to Oklahoma, your quarterback beats his former team, you're feeling on a roll, ready to go. There's no reason why you're not able to roll into Texas A&M and give yourself a really solid chance. That's a tough environment. Again, we're going to talk about this Texas A&M team as we continue these team previews, but you know, it's a team that on paper they should be able to handle things. It's just, again, that environment that you're going to see at Texas A&M. But yeah, Georgia one is one where you're going to go ahead and probably assume that one's going to go to the Dogs, but you never know. And then I think that Vanderbilt game, depending on where they're at, they're either going to be at a point where they have a fighting chance and they're going to go to Vanderbilt and it's going to be a battle, or they're going to start seeing that tail end kind of fall off depending on where they're at momentum-wise. And like you mentioned, the Iron Bowl being at home, it doesn't matter when Auburn and Alabama play each other. It doesn't matter if one team is undefeated and the other has 1 win on the season. You're playing an Iron Bowl at home. Your team automatically is going to be extra juice, and either team is going to have a fight in that one for sure.
That is really interesting. So, like, when we started this preview, I wasn't convinced that I was going to be extremely high on Auburn, but now as we're kind of digging into it, do we need to maybe talk about another gambling aspect of this team and tell you that DraftKings Sportsbook has Auburn at plus 400 to make the college football playoff this year. I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but again, I think the schedule, if we assume that Auburn is a talent level requisite to the improvements they've made in the recruiting classes, getting a quarterback in that's looking for another shot to improve and show what he's capable of in the SEC, and we just count the games that we think they can't win, as you mentioned, A&M, Georgia. Let's say that those are the two that are going to be really tough, and we might lean toward the opposition. I think some of those games in the middle at Oklahoma and hosting Missouri, a team that won 10 games last year, but Auburn gets that game at home, and Missouri couldn't play very well on the road last year. So if I'm just looking at Georgia and A&M and saying, hey, those are going to be the L's for your schedule, if you clean up the Oklahoma and Missouri games, which I think Auburn could very well be favored or they could be relatively close.
Mhm.
Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt. I know that we can't count any team out, especially a couple of road games there, but it's legitimately possible with a Baylor win. That's going to have to be the tone setter. You could look at maybe going into the Iron Bowl with a 2-loss season and saying, hey, we beat Alabama. We're in at 10-2. Am I drinking the Kool-Aid right now, or is this possible more so because of the schedule than anything?
I would say schedule than anything. Again, this is good. This is looking good for Hugh Freeze. If you're someone in his position, like we mentioned earlier, that is trying to keep this job. And as we have gone through this preview, I've started to believe more and more that this is a doable schedule for Auburn. We're going to see as we move forward in these previews, some teams where it doesn't matter how things line up, it's not looking good, or it doesn't matter how things line up, they're probably going to be a 10-win team and going to be in that conversation. Auburn is definitely one of those toss-ups right now. So interested to see what's going to play out for the Auburn Tigers moving into this season. Obviously, we're going to continue to cover them and all the SEC teams moving forward. But I don't know. I think, Brenden, you might be drinking the Auburn Kool-Aid.
I think there could be a value on that notion of a plus 400 to make the playoff because I can see only a few things needing to break in their direction for that to happen. That being said, when it comes to the win total, I honestly, my final word, I don't know that the value is on over because of how heavy the juice is. This might be a stay away for me, one that I'm not super confident to bet in either direction. But if I were going to, I'm looking at those DraftKings Sportsbooks odds, plus 135 for under 7.5. Hugh Freeze could very easily go 7-5 this season, and perhaps that's enough to save his job because it would technically be a winning season. But I look at Ball State, South Alabama, Mercer, you give them to the Tigers. Kentucky at home should be for sure a win. Even if you just win one of the two with that Arkansas Vanderbilt, you're up to 5. We haven't mentioned the Baylor game. Hosting Missouri is one that they'll want to have there in Auburn, Alabama. Like 7 feels like a number they could land on, still have a decent season. But Hugh Freeze so far has fallen below expectations. There's a lot of other good teams in this conference. I'm worried that he might fall a little bit shy of the expectations, even though I see a realm in which they blow out Baylor. We're talking about a different Auburn team rolling through that SEC slate. Right now, I'm on that borderline where I would say just because plus 135 is the odds on under, maybe I'm penciling Auburn in around 7-5. Even though I see a path, I'm not sure I'm willing to take it.
Well, only time will tell what that record will be for Auburn and if it's going to be enough to keep Hugh Freeze in that head coaching position. But that's a look at your Auburn Tigers heading into the 2025 season. Again, Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Hanna Barton, Southeast Sports fans. Thanks for tuning in for this team preview. And don't worry, we've got more coming for you later.